I was supposed to be the happiest man alive that weekend. Instead, I stood frozen in a church hallway with my world spinning, my stomach in knots, and my heart pounding so hard I could hear it echo in my ears. My name's Eric, I'm 29, and up until about 3 hours before my wedding, I thought I had life all figured out. I grew up in a pretty normal suburb just outside of Austin, Texas. My parents split when I was 13. It wasn't exactly messy, but it wasn't smooth either. Mom moved out, and Dad didn't waste much time moving on. By the time I was 15, he was remarried to Vanessa, my stepmom. If you asked anyone else, they'd say she was sweet, poised, a good influence. But if you asked me, let's just say, there was always this undercurrent with her. Like no matter how polite her smile was, she never really liked me. Not outright hate, just quiet disapproval. The kind you feel in the room even when nothing's said out loud. I didn't push it. I kept my head down, got good grades, and eventually moved out for college. Vanessa didn't come to my graduation, claiming she had a conference in New Orleans. I didn't expect her to. My dad showed up, took me out for steak, and handed me a card with a few $100 in it. That was enough. I had no plans of seeing Vanessa much after that, and honestly, I was fine with it. Life moved on. I landed a stable job doing systems integration at a mid-sized tech firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well, and I had a good team. I moved into a one-bedroom condo, started brewing my own coffee, and got myself a dog, a yellow lab named Milo who, frankly, was more emotionally consistent than most people in my life. Things were good. Then I met Sophie. God, Sophie was like a ray of sunlight after years of gray. Smart, sarcastic in the best way, an absolute wizard in the kitchen, and she could destroy me in Mario Kart, which I admired, even if it bruised my ego. We met at a mutual friend's game night, and ended up talking for 4 hours straight, while everyone else got tipsy off sangria and forgot to play the actual game. She wasn't just fun. She was grounded. She'd been through some stuff too. Her parents divorced when she was a kid, and she basically raised her little brother, Daniel, who was a sweet, awkward kid just finishing college when we met. That made me like her even more. Fast forward 3 years, and I was proposing in the park where we had our first date. She said yes before I even finished the sentence. Our engagement was short, only 6 months. We didn't want to drag it out. Sophie had this idea of a small garden ceremony with fairy lights and acoustic guitar, and I was on board. Everything felt like it was falling into place. Except, there was this one small, gnawing issue. Vanessa. My dad insisted she'd be there, which I tolerated. She was family. After all, though I use that term loosely. Sophie, bless her heart, wanted to be inclusive. She even offered to have a specific table set aside for a family of the groom who may need space. I laughed when she said it, but looking back, she was right to have a contingency plan. The first real red flag came during the rehearsal dinner. We held it at this cozy Italian place downtown. It wasn't fancy, but it had this old-school charm. Candlelight, exposed brick, handwritten menus. Sophie's family flew in from out of state, and everyone was warm and chatty, sharing stories and laughs. My dad gave a short, sweet toast. Sophie's mom told an embarrassing story about Sophie writing love notes to her 5th-grade crush. I was beaming. I'd never felt so lucky to be surrounded by people who cared. And then Vanessa stood up. She clinked her wine glass gently. That kind of forced, performative, attention, everyone gesture that made the hair on my arms stand up. Her smile was too wide, her tone a little too polished. I just want to say how proud I am of Eric. He's come such a long way from the boy who never quite understood which fork to use at dinner. A few polite chuckles. Mine wasn't one of them. And Sophie, she added, turning to my fiancée with a gracious nod. You're a lovely girl. Very passionate. I just hope you're ready for the realities of marriage. It's not all laughter and cupcakes, you know. Someone coughed. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophie blinked, stunned. I gently touched her hand under the table. She gave me the kind of smile that says, we'll talk later, but I could feel her fingers tense against mine. I wanted to say something right then, to shut it down, call Vanessa out, but my dad shot me a look across the table. That pleading kind of look. Like please don't make a scene. So I bit my tongue. Later that night, Sophie laughed it off, but not in the way that means it's truly okay. More like, let's just get through this wedding and never have to deal with her again. I agreed. But that was only the beginning. The next morning, the day of the wedding, I was up early. I couldn't sleep. My best man, Adam, had crashed in the guest room. We were up drinking coffee and joking around to calm my nerves. He kept asking if I was sure I wanted to go through with it, but only in that teasing, bro-ish way groomsmen do to keep it light. I told him I was more than sure. I was ready. Around 10 a.m., people started arriving at the venue. It was a garden behind this small historic inn, with ivy-covered archways and old oak trees. The weather was perfect. Sophie's florist had done an incredible job, soft blues, whites, and just a hint of pale gold in the centerpieces. Everything looked like it had been plucked from a Pinterest board. I was in the side room, already dressed in my suit, straightening my cufflinks, when there was a knock at the door. "Eric? It's Vanessa. Can I have a moment?" I hesitated. Adam raised an eyebrow at me from the corner. "You want me to stay?" "No, it's fine," I said, straightening up. "I'll be quick." That would be the last time I underestimated her. She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her with this slow, deliberate motion. She was dressed in a champagne-colored dress that looked a little too close to white for my comfort, but I didn't comment on it. "Hi," I said carefully. "Everything okay?" Vanessa didn't smile. "I wasn't going to say anything," she started, pulling her clutch open. "But I couldn't, in good conscience, let you walk into this blind." My stomach tightened. "What are you talking about?" She pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, then turned it toward me. Messages, screenshots, photos, all of them showing Sophie. At restaurants, in a car, hugging someone, a man. Vanessa's voice was low and calm, like she was breaking bad news to a stranger, not her stepson. "She's been seeing someone else, Eric." I didn't want to believe it, but I had a friend look into it. A private investigator. I stared at the screen. My breath caught. It was Sophie, no doubt. And the man, he looked familiar, but I couldn't place him right away. There were timestamps, captions, even heart emojis overlaid on a few images, as if screenshotted from a private story or chat. I felt my legs go weak. Vanessa reached out, gently touching my arm. "I'm telling you this because I care. You deserve better. You've always deserved better." My mind was spinning. Everything blurred for a second. And that's when Adam walked in. Right on cue. "Hey, man, just wanted to see if..." He stopped mid-sentence, eyes darting from Vanessa to me, then to the phone. "What's going on?" he asked. I handed him the phone with trembling fingers. He stared at it for a long second. Then he squinted. "Wait a second, that guy? That's Daniel." "Daniel?" I repeated, my voice hoarse. "Sophie's brother," Adam said, zooming in on the photo. "Dude, that's her brother. I met him at the engagement party. You don't recognize him?" My jaw dropped. And in that moment, everything started to unravel. But that was only the beginning. I didn't say anything at first. Couldn't really. My throat felt dry, like I'd swallowed sandpaper, and the pounding in my ears was back. I just stood there staring at the screen while Adam kept scrolling through the photos, muttering things like, "Yup, that's definitely Daniel. And is this supposed to be evidence?" He was calm, confused, but calm. Meanwhile, Vanessa stood there like she was watching her plan unravel in slow motion. "I thought you should know before you make a mistake," she said again, with that same too soft tone, like she was trying to pass off a lie as concern. I finally found my voice. "You hired someone to follow Sophie?" She didn't answer right away, just slipped her phone back into her clutch, as if the moment hadn't happened. "It's not like that. I heard things. I had a feeling. Mother's instinct, you might say." "You're not my mother," I said, louder than I meant to. Adam looked up. Vanessa flinched. That was the first crack in her expression. She drew herself up a little, eyes narrowing. "I've been in your life for over a decade. I've looked out for you more than your actual mother ever did." That one stung. I took a step back. "You mean the woman you constantly talk down about? Who raised me before you ever came around?" I shook my head. "You didn't come in to look out for me. You came in and treated me like a problem." Her face went cold. "I tried to give you a better life. You tried to control it." The room was thick with tension. Adam, sensing we were past the point of peacekeeping, stepped between us. "I think it's time you left," he said to Vanessa. She didn't move. "Eric, I'm trying to save you from humiliation. You're trying to sabotage my wedding," I snapped. "And you used Sophie's own brother to do it." Her lips curled slightly, like she wanted to say something. Maybe some final blow, but she stopped herself. Instead, she turned on her heel and walked out. I should have felt relief. But I didn't. I felt violated, shaken, betrayed. Adam and I sat in silence for a few minutes. He kept glancing at me like I was a ticking bomb. You good? I nodded, but I wasn't. I need to talk to Sophie, I said, grabbing my phone. He reached out. Maybe don't tell her yet. Why not? He hesitated. Because it's her brother. And it's her wedding day. You want her walking down the aisle thinking about all this. I paused. He had a point. But still, I needed her to know. Not the whole thing yet, but enough. I found Sophie in one of the side rooms, surrounded by her bridesmaids and her mom. She looked radiant, like something out of a movie, but the moment our eyes met, she knew something was wrong. Can we talk? I asked quietly. The room went silent. She stepped away, brushing past satin and tulle and perfume. We found a quiet corner by the garden arch, just far enough that no one could hear us. I need to ask you something, I began. Her face paled. What's going on? I took a deep breath. Vanessa just pulled me aside. She showed me photos of you with another guy. Said you were cheating. Sophie's face crumpled in confusion, then horror. What? It's Daniel, I added quickly. The photos, it's just you and your brother. Hugging, walking into cafes. Nothing sketchy. Her hand went to her mouth. Are you serious? I nodded. She tried to spin it like you were having an affair. Sophie stared at me, then started laughing. It wasn't joyful. It was that kind of half-broken, stunned laughter that people do when something's too messed up to process. That woman is unbelievable, she muttered. I didn't believe her, I said quickly. But, for a second, I froze. It looked so real. She even put fake captions on the screenshots. Of course she did. Sophie looked up at me, eyes filled with something deeper than anger. Disappointment. Exhaustion. This is why I didn't want her at the wedding, she whispered. I knew she'd try something. But this is, she trailed off. I reached for her hand. We'll get through it, I promised. Let's just get through today. We'll deal with everything else after. She nodded slowly, but the glow was gone from her cheeks. The ceremony started an hour later. Vanessa was nowhere to be seen. I thought that would be the end of it, that she'd crawl back to her hotel, sulk in silence, and maybe my dad would give her a stern talking to. But I underestimated her. Because 2 days later, after the honeymoon had just begun, things escalated in a way I never expected. We were in Colorado, tucked into a cozy Airbnb in the mountains, sipping wine in front of a fire when I got a call from my dad. He sounded off. Eric, he began slowly. I think we need to talk. Everything okay? He sighed. No, not really. I just had a very long conversation with Vanessa. She says you yelled at her before the ceremony, that you accused her of fabricating things. I rubbed my temple. Dad, she did fabricate things. I don't know, he said uncertainly. She showed me some screenshots. I sat up straight. You believe her? I'm not saying I believe her. I'm saying it's complicated. She said she was trying to protect you. I stood up, pacing. Sophie watched me, concern growing on her face. Dad, she tried to frame Sophie, with photos of her and her brother. I didn't recognize him, my dad admitted. Daniel, right? It did look a little cozy. She put heart emojis on the photos to make it look romantic. He was silent for a beat. I need time to figure this out. And that was when I realized. He wasn't going to stand up for me. Not really. Not against her. Even after all that, he was still trying to keep the peace. I hung up. Sophie didn't say anything, just stood up and hugged me. When we got back from the honeymoon, things had cooled, or so I thought. We threw a little post-wedding barbecue for close friends, a chance to relax after the whirlwind. Sophie's family came. Adam came. My dad didn't. He called to say he wasn't feeling well, but I knew the truth. Vanessa had poisoned the well. Over the next few weeks, little things started piling up. My aunt, who had always been warm towards Sophie, stopped returning her texts. My cousin sent a weird message congratulating me and then added, "Hope you guys work things out." People were talking. Vanessa was still sowing doubt, behind the scenes, quietly, subtly, the way she always operated. She wasn't just trying to ruin the wedding. She was trying to rewrite the narrative. That's when Sophie found out the worst of it. She was scrolling through Facebook, looking at tagged photos from the wedding, when she found comments. Under one of the group shots, Vanessa had written, "Hard to smile when you know what's really going on behind the scenes. Some people just love drama." And under another, of me and Sophie at the altar, he deserved someone loyal, not someone playing house with two men. The comments were vague, just cryptic enough to avoid being deleted by moderators, but enough to plant seeds in people's minds. Sophie was furious. I was shaking. This wasn't just passive-aggressive now. This was slander. I called my dad again. She's crossing lines, I told him. You need to get her to back off. He sighed. Eric, maybe it's time to let this go. You're married now. Just move forward. You don't get it, I said, my voice tight. She's still attacking us. She's upset, he replied weakly. She didn't think Sophie was right for you. She was trying to protect you, in her own way. That was the breaking point. That was when I realized my father was never going to defend me. Not really. Vanessa had wrapped herself so tightly around his life that he'd rather betray his own son than confront the truth. And that's when the shift happened in me. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was ready. Because if Vanessa wanted to play games, then fine. Let's play. I wouldn't go nuclear. Not yet. That wasn't my style. But I would make sure the truth came out. Every single detail. And I had just the plan to do it. I didn't sleep much that night. After the phone call with my dad, after truly realizing, that he wasn't just ignoring what Vanessa did, but excusing it, I stayed up on the couch while Sophie drifted off in the bedroom. She offered to stay up with me, but I told her not to. I needed time to think, to sit with it. And honestly, I was tired of pretending like I hadn't seen this coming. Because deep down, I had. Vanessa had always found subtle ways to undermine me. From the time she accidentally left me out of family vacations to how she'd smile in front of Sophie and then whisper little jabs behind her back. She never yelled, never screamed. She didn't have to. Her weapons were suggestion, implication, innuendo. And now, her masterpiece was complete. She had turned my father against me. Not all at once. No, that would have been too obvious. She'd done it slowly, over years, like erosion. And somehow, I'd let it happen. That was the part that stung the most. I think it's easy to feel like a grown man, to walk through life believing you're your own person, making your own choices. Until someone reminds you that, when it comes to family, some old wounds never quite heal. I wasn't just angry with my dad. I felt small again. Like that 15-year-old kid who watched his dad remarry and slowly get replaced in his own house. That night, I sat on the couch with Milo curled up beside me and made myself a promise. I would not let Vanessa define the story. Not mine, not Sophie's, not anyone's. But first, I needed to get away. The next morning, I told Sophie I needed space to think, and she understood immediately. That's one of the million reasons I married her. She never takes things personally when she knows I'm just trying to gather myself. We packed a few bags and drove out to her cousin's cabin by Lake Travis. It was quiet, simple, and isolated enough to help me clear my head. I turned my phone off for 3 days. That might not sound like much, but when your entire family's imploding, your Facebook comments are getting poisoned, and your wedding photos are being turned into ammo by your stepmom, it's the closest thing to peace you can get. Sophie read books by the fireplace, and I just decompressed. On the second day, I made a list. Not on my phone. I wrote it by hand in one of the old journals Sophie kept for her writing ideas. She let me tear out the pages. I titled it, What I Know to Be True. Sophie loves me. Vanessa does not have power over me unless I let her. My dad made his choice. I didn't make him choose. I don't owe silence to people who try to destroy me quietly. I can respond, not react. Writing those words was like taking control again. I wasn't going to start a war, but I was going to reclaim my story. And to do that, I needed a plan that wouldn't stoop to her level, but would reveal the truth, cleanly, without drama. Because if there's one thing people like Vanessa hate, it's exposure without mess. They thrive in shadows. I was going to bring her into the light. We returned home that weekend. Sophie went back to work Monday morning, and I took a personal day. I sat down at my desk and started organizing. First, the screenshots. I had asked Adam to forward me everything Vanessa had shown me. Luckily, he'd taken pictures of the fake screenshots with his own phone, just in case, he'd said, like he knew this wasn't over. I looked through each image and started noting inconsistencies. Different fonts. Weird cropping. Even some photos where the lighting on Daniel's face didn't match the background. Poorly photoshopped, if you looked close enough. Then I remembered something Sophie told me once. Daniel had a very specific tattoo on his left wrist, a small, minimalist mountain range. But in the photo Vanessa showed me of Sophie kissing him on the cheek at a park, no tattoo. Wrong wrist. Wrong person. I saved it all. Labeled each one. Compiled it into a folder called Fabrications. Then I went deeper. I pulled our engagement party photos and found a shot of Daniel in profile. Same hoodie. Same sneakers. Exact same guy from the cheating photos. I circled everything. Wrote notes. I wasn't just documenting. I was building a case. It didn't stop there. Over the next few days, I went through every comment thread where Vanessa had dropped subtle poison and started responding. Not aggressively, just calmly. Factually. Not sure what you mean, Vanessa. The man in those photos is Sophie's brother. You met him at our engagement dinner. Just to clarify, we've confirmed all screenshots were doctored. We appreciate your concern. If anyone has questions about this, feel free to reach out. We're happy to explain what actually happened. No anger. No fighting. Just truth. It spread quickly. People noticed, and they started asking questions. Quietly at first, then more openly. My cousin Emily messaged me privately. Hey, sorry. I believed some of what Vanessa was saying. Didn't know the full story. Thanks for clearing it up. Others followed. Sophie's mom even sent me a card with a short note that simply read, "Sometimes dignity is the loudest voice in the room. Proud of you." It helped. But the real healing wasn't online. It was in the little things. Sophie and I started going on long walks after work again, cooking together more, laughing. The tension that had hung over our first few weeks of marriage began to lift. She helped me draft a short letter to her brother, Daniel, apologizing for how he'd been dragged into the mess. He responded with a voice message that nearly made me cry. Dude, I didn't take it personally. You've always been good to Sophie. You're her peace. That's all I care about. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until I did. I began sleeping again. Not perfectly, but better. More solidly. And then, one day, something inside me clicked. A shift. A small but undeniable turning point. I was at work, halfway through a system rebuild project, when my boss popped into my office and said, "You've been killing it lately, Eric. We're putting your name in for lead on the client-side migration." It wasn't just a promotion, it was a statement. A reminder that despite everything going on in my personal life, I was still growing, still valuable. The next day, I bought a second-hand espresso machine, something I'd always wanted but had never let myself splurge on. Sophie teased me about turning our kitchen into a hipster cafe, but secretly, she loved it. Every morning, I made her a fresh vanilla oat latte with a little heart in the foam. She called it Eric's peace offering. Little routines. Small victories. That's how you rebuild. Not with grand gestures, but by reclaiming normal. But even as life stabilized, something still lingered. A question. What if she tries this again? Vanessa had gone quiet. Yes. But silence from someone like her didn't mean retreat. It meant recalculation. I decided it was time to go further. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to ensure she couldn't pull this again. Not with me. Not with anyone. So I started collecting statements. From Daniel. From Adam. Even from Sophie's bridesmaid, Hannah, who had seen Vanessa arguing with a wedding planner in the hallway the morning of the ceremony, apparently demanding to know if there was a backup groom seating chart in case there were last-minute changes. Creepy, right? I compiled everything, in writing, with timestamps, photos, and commentary. Not to sue. Not to escalate legally, not yet, anyway. But to document. Because if Vanessa ever tried to spin the narrative again, this wouldn't just be he said, she said. This would be receipts. And then came the unexpected twist. One night, as Sophie and I were watching TV, I got a text from my dad. "Can we talk? I think I made a mistake." I didn't respond right away. Sophie looked at me, raising an eyebrow. "You going to answer?" "I don't know," I said honestly. She waited, then added, "You don't have to make peace for anyone else's comfort. Do it for you. Or not at all." That hit me harder than I expected. Because she was right. I'd been so caught up in trying to prove things, to defend my side, to show the world I wasn't the villain. I hadn't stopped to ask what I actually needed. And for the first time in my life, I realized maybe I didn't need my dad's approval. Maybe I never did. But I did need closure. So I met with him. Just the two of us. At the same steakhouse we went to after my college graduation. The same one where he'd given me a card and told me how proud he was. This time, there were no cards. No big smiles. Just tension, a couple of overcooked steaks, and a very awkward silence until he finally cleared his throat. "Eric, I need to apologize." I waited. I let Vanessa get into my head. I thought I was doing the right thing, trusting her instincts. But I see now. I should have trusted you. He looked older than I remembered. Not just physically, spiritually. Like the guilt had aged him. "I don't know how to fix it," he added. I thought about it for a while. And then I said, You don't need to fix it. Just don't let it happen again. That was the turning point. The moment I realized I was no longer the boy looking up at his dad. I was a man, and I was done letting other people narrate my story. But Vanessa? She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. By the time spring rolled around, I was no longer the same man who sat frozen in a tux 3 hours before his wedding, staring at fake screenshots from a stepmother with a twisted agenda. Something in me had shifted, not in a vengeful, bitter way. I wasn't looking to lash out or burn bridges. But I was done playing defense. This wasn't about petty revenge. This was about justice, measured, intentional, and undeniable. Vanessa had spent years operating in the shadows, manipulating, distorting, whispering things just loud enough to poison, but never loud enough to trace. But for the first time, I had the leverage, the truth, the support, and I was going to use it. Not recklessly, but with precision. And it all started with a wedding video. See, we'd hired a videographer, a young guy named Brandon who was building his portfolio and offered to do a documentary-style video for a steal. He had GoPros set up around the venue, roaming cams, even drone footage. We hadn't watched all of it yet. Things had been well, you know. But one rainy Saturday, Sophie and I curled up on the couch and finally hit play. Most of it was beautiful. Her walking down the aisle. My awkward happy tears. Our vows. The dance floor. But there was one section buried in the raw footage folder that made me sit up straight. Brandon had apparently left one of his small cameras rolling near the hallway outside the ceremony space. And it caught the moment Vanessa cornered the wedding planner. The one Sophie's bridesmaid had mentioned. The video showed her leaning in close, voice low but clear. I'm just saying, if something were to happen, let's say the groom had a change of heart, would there be a backup layout? Or would that be chaos for your team? The planner, visibly confused, said, "We don't usually have backups for cold feet. Is there something I should know?" Vanessa laughed. "Oh, I just like to be prepared. Eric's always been a bit impulsive. You know how grooms can be." Then she walked off, heels clacking, like she hadn't just dropped a psychological grenade on a total stranger. I stared at the screen, stunned. Sophie just shook her head and said, "She was planning for it. Like she expected you to call it off." And then it clicked. She hadn't just hoped the wedding would fall apart. She was actively trying to engineer it. From the screenshots, to the cryptic comments, to planting seeds of doubt with relatives. And now this. It was all a setup, a slow, coordinated attempt to ruin our marriage before it began. And I finally had the proof. That footage was the first domino. Over the next 2 weeks, I started laying the foundation for what I now jokingly called Operation Garden Snake. A plan to not just defend my reputation, but to expose Vanessa's manipulations in a way that couldn't be denied, ignored, or gaslit away. But to pull it off, I needed allies. First, I called Adam. He didn't hesitate. "Dude, I've been waiting for this moment." He still had the photos from the wedding morning. He agreed to write a full statement. Exactly what she said, how she acted, and how it lined up with the doctored screenshots. He even offered to testify, if it came to that. I told him I wasn't looking for court. Not unless Vanessa really pushed back. But his offer mattered more than he knew. Then I called Daniel. It was a weird conversation to initiate. "Hey, mind if I use photos of you getting fake framed as the other man in a cheating scandal cooked up by my stepmom?" But Daniel, being the kind of low-key, loyal guy he is, just said, "As long as Sophie's good with it, I'm good. That lady gives me the creeps." He sent me a signed statement too. Simple, clear, confirming that every photo Vanessa used was of them spending time as siblings. Some were from public meetups. A few were even from his Instagram. He even sent me the original posts to cross-reference. Now I had the fake screenshots, the wedding video hallway clip, multiple witness statements, the original photos used in Vanessa's scheme with timestamps and sources, a full breakdown of inconsistencies, fabrications, and motive. But I wasn't ready to launch yet. Not until I did one more thing. I reached out to my aunt. Aunt Melanie had always been a quiet ally in the family. She was my dad's younger sister, never got along with Vanessa, and had once pulled me aside at a Thanksgiving dinner and said, "Don't let people treat your kindness like weakness, sweetie." I called her and laid it all out. Every detail. There was a long pause on the line, and then she said, "I knew something was off." She told me stories I hadn't heard, about how Vanessa would casually mention Sophie's wild side at family brunches, or how she once implied Sophie flirted with her own brother in front of an entire dinner table. Melanie said she never believed it, but the way everyone would nervously laugh or change the subject made her sick. "I think you should tell the whole family," she said. I hesitated. "You think they'll believe me?" "You don't need all of them to believe you. Just enough to end her grip." That gave me the clarity I needed. And so, I began preparing the exposure. Not dramatic, not cruel, just factual, irrefutable, and public. I compiled everything into a PDF, professional, clean, and devastating. I titled it, Clarification Regarding Recent Events and Misunderstandings Surrounding Our Wedding. Inside was a calm, polite letter from me and Sophie explaining that we hadn't wanted to air any dirty laundry, but due to circulating rumors and ongoing falsehoods, we felt it necessary to share the facts. Then came the evidence. Screenshots, side-by-sides of doctored versus original photos, statement quotes, the hallway video stills, a timeline of Vanessa's comments and behaviors. At the end, we wrote, "We hope this clears up any confusion and helps put an end to any harmful speculation. We appreciate those who reached out with support and concern. This situation has been difficult, but we believe in the power of truth and family accountability." I didn't send it immediately. I sat with it for 3 days, tweaked a few things, ran it by a lawyer friend who said, "It's airtight. You're not accusing. You're proving." Then I prepared the delivery. We weren't just going to email it. That would be easy to ignore. Instead, we decided to time it perfectly for Easter brunch. My dad's side of the family had a big tradition every Easter, a gathering at my grandmother's house, where everyone brought a dish and tried to pretend things were fine. Vanessa would be there. So would everyone else who had heard the rumors, the whispers, the poison. And that's where we'd make our move. Sophie and I RSVP'd like everything was normal. We showed up a little late, just late enough to make an entrance, just early enough to beat the food line. And in my hand, a stack of printed copies of the PDF, professionally bound at Staples, with soft covers and page numbers. No flair, just facts. The moment of truth came after the meal, when people were lounging around, chatting. I stood up, cleared my throat. "Hey, everyone. Sophie and I just wanted to say a quick thank you. It's been a crazy few months since the wedding, and we really appreciate those who supported us. But we've also become aware of some misunderstandings that we feel it's time to clarify." Vanessa, seated beside my dad, froze. I handed out the booklets, one to each adult. I had 10 copies. More than enough. People started reading immediately. You could feel the energy in the room shift. The silence. The raised eyebrows. The gasps. Aunt Melanie sat back with her arms crossed like she was watching a courtroom drama unfold. My dad looked from the pages to me, and then to Vanessa. She was already pale. Someone murmured, "Oh my God." Another said, "She fabricated all this?" The damage was done, not by rage, not by spectacle, but by proof. And Vanessa? She didn't say a word. Not yet. But what she did next, that was her biggest mistake of all. Vanessa didn't explode. She didn't shout, deny, cry, or storm out of my grandmother's house in a dramatic whirlwind the way part of me had imagined. That would have made things simpler, cleaner. But of course, that's not how people like her operate. They don't play their cards openly. They retreat, regroup, and strike again later from the shadows, or at least they try. After I handed out the evidence at Easter brunch, the room fell into a strange hush. Chairs scraped softly. Pages turned. My grandmother blinked slowly at the packet in her hands while Aunt Melanie muttered, "I knew it," under her breath. My dad read through the pages like a man discovering a crime scene in his own home. And Vanessa? She sat there with her hands folded in her lap, the booklet unopened in front of her. Still, poised, but her jaw was clenched so tight, I thought her molars might crack. I looked at her one last time. Not to confront, not to argue, but just to see her. Really see her. And what I saw wasn't power. It wasn't confidence or superiority. It was fear, the kind that only comes when someone realizes the mask has finally slipped. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. Sophie and I left shortly after. We said our goodbyes, hugged Melanie, thanked Grandma for the food, and drove home in silence. It wasn't awkward, it was peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you stood your ground and told the truth, even when it would have been easier to stay quiet. But, like I said, Vanessa didn't explode. Not until later. The fallout began the next morning. I woke up to 32 missed calls and voicemails between midnight and 6 a.m., not from Vanessa, but from my father. Each one more panicked than the last. Eric, call me back. We need to talk. This is getting out of hand. What the hell were you thinking? You blindsided her. You've humiliated your own family. Vanessa's furious. She says you're trying to destroy her reputation. I didn't respond. I didn't have to, because by the afternoon, things had already taken on a life of their own. See, I didn't just hand out those packets in person. I also emailed the PDF to a few select people, extended family members who hadn't been able to attend the brunch but had apparently heard about the rumors. The subject line read, "Setting the record straight, from Eric and Sophie." No drama, no name calling, just evidence. Word spread quickly. Screenshots were forwarded. Text chains lit up. Within 48 hours, Vanessa's web of half-truths unraveled like cheap yarn. Aunt Melanie called me the next evening. Your dad's in damage control mode. Apparently, Vanessa's trying to spin it like she was misled by someone else, that a friend gave her the wrong information. I actually laughed when I heard that. So now she's blaming a fake private investigator? Yup. And she's furious you made her look bad. She made herself look bad. Melanie was quiet for a second, then said, she doesn't know what to do when people stop letting her get away with things. Neither did my dad, apparently. He showed up at our condo 3 days later, uninvited. I opened the door and just stared at him. He looked weathered, sleep-deprived. He held his car keys in one hand and a folded piece of paper in the other. I'm not here to defend her, he said before I could speak. I just want to understand why you had to make it public. I let the silence settle between us before answering. You never believed me when I said she was manipulative. You looked away when she tried to ruin my marriage. You told me to move on and keep the peace. But now that other people know the truth, now you care. He looked like I'd slapped him. She's still my wife, he said, almost pleading. And I'm still your son, I replied. But you made your choice. And now I've made mine. I didn't slam the door. I just closed it. Slowly. After that, things moved fast. Vanessa disappeared from family events. My grandmother stopped inviting her. My cousins, the ones who had kept their distance out of confusion, reached out with apologies. Emily even sent Sophie a long message admitting how ashamed she felt for believing Vanessa's hints. We didn't hold grudges. We just moved forward, on our own terms. But Vanessa? She tried one last thing. About a month after the brunch, I got a letter in the mail. It was handwritten, neatly folded, and exactly as manipulative as I expected. Eric, I've always tried to protect you. You may not understand my methods, but I acted out of love. Sophie is a good girl, but I still believe you could have aimed higher. Regardless, I wish you both well. Vanessa, no apology, no ownership, just the same old self-righteous spin. I burned it in the sink. As for my dad, we didn't speak for nearly 5 months. And honestly, that was harder than I expected. He wasn't perfect, but he was my dad. And there were days when I missed the idea of him. The memory of steak dinners and football games, not the man who stood quietly behind the woman trying to destroy my life. Eventually, we met again. Not to reconcile, but to be honest. It was his idea. A neutral cafe. No Vanessa. He apologized. Not perfectly. Not with all the right words. But sincerely. I failed you, he said. I didn't stand up for you when I should have. I let her rewrite things, and I watched it happen because it was easier than facing the truth. I didn't say it was okay, but I did not. And I said, that's a start. We didn't hug. We didn't pretend to be close again. But we left the door open. Vanessa and my dad stayed together. I wasn't surprised. Some people would rather cling to comfort than admit they've built their lives on manipulation. And that's his choice. But my life? It's better now. Sophie and I traveled that summer. Italy, Portugal, small villages and long dinners on balconies. We walked cobblestone streets without looking over our shoulders. No drama. No noise. I got the promotion at work. Eventually even started mentoring some of the junior techs. Sophie published her first short story collection. It's brilliant, by the way. And every morning, we still make lattes. I still draw little hearts in the foam, though sometimes they look more like potatoes. She pretends not to notice. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It just is. And Vanessa? She still lurks on Facebook, probably. Still polishing the same smile. Still waiting for someone to let her back in. But not me. Because when someone tries to ruin your life and call it love, the best revenge is not screaming at them, or humiliating them, or making them feel small. The best revenge is being free. And I am.